Hey guys, this is INTP Rob, and I just want to quickly dispel three myths that I perceive to be persistent about TI users, particularly dominant TI users. And I would like to now kind of use my TI to show how a lot of these myths are very misleading and are sort of half-truths at best. Okay? Because I'm in most of these. Look, I greatly appreciate TE because TE helps the TI user to get some actual empirical data to support some of the things that they're believing. And I personally work in a business sector, and you better believe it is not totally run by TI thinking. I mean, you've got to be able to get results, do things that work, measure success, all that stuff, and it's very useful. And I value TE for sure. But I have been kind of looking at a couple of videos on YouTube, and I've now seen at least two, TE users sort of misrepresent TI, and I think maybe it's just, again, I think it's very easy to not understand a function when it's not in your kind of, it's not one of your more preferred or valued functions. It's easy to kind of misunderstand it, and I think for any function, if you have a negative feeling against a function, then chances are you misunderstand it, because when you really understand a function, you understand that it has its benefits, its positives, and its negatives, and it is not, and even to take it further, just to go deeper, I don't personally believe that, this whole idea of benefits and positives, it's all kind of subjective anyway. Like, there's some, practical benefits, but it all depends on the person who's observing that function to determine, see if, to see it as beneficial or hindrance. It depends on how the person's looking at it. But anyway, back to the point. So what are the three myths that I feel are kind of permeating discussions around TI? So I think one of the biggest myths is that TI is impractical. TE is practical, TI is impractical. And this is not fully true, and I'll tell you why. People associate practicality with short-term visible results. People have a tendency to want to, test something out, see if it works, and kind of get immediate results. Kind of be able to really get some tangible results right away. Whereas TI, it actually does aim to be practical. It's just that it's not concerned with necessarily taking action right here in the here and now. What it's concerned about is accurately understanding how something works on kind of a deeper level than just the surface level, which sometimes takes longer to contemplate and longer to speculate and longer to try to, piece together how something works. But once they understand it fully, then they can start actually kind of exerting some action against it. They're not as active as a TE user per se, but they are. Another way to put it is this: it is very practical to understand accurately how the world works on a deeper level. Now, obviously, like I said, that perspective is going to require more time, more study, more speculation. It will require some testing. And look, when you look at things like, the theories that Einstein put together, like E equals MC squared has been a very practical function for people to use, a very practical equation, E equals MC squared has been a very practical equation in mathematics for quite some time. But, it wasn't something that Einstein was able to just quickly look into the world and just, oh yeah, E equals MC squared. No, he had to really think about it. and form this theory and test it and all this kind of stuff. And I'm sure people thought, well, Einstein is over there just in his head, not doing anything, being totally impractical, when in reality he was kind of sketching out the way, the kind of almost the very foundations of how this universe operates. But people are going to look at that because people seem to be biased towards this. And look, again, I appreciate TE. I'm not against TE. I just think that TI users are able to see beyond just the surface. For example, this is not the best example because I don't want to. This would be an example of a very immature TE user. So I don't want to. This is definitely not representative of some of the brilliant TE users who understand context and things like that and have some values. But a very immature TE user might, for example, be if they were a parent and their child was, speaking out of turn, they felt, or speaking back to them, they might slap the child to shut them up. And they might observe, okay, if I slap this kid or if I threaten to slap him, he's going to shut up. And they are therefore feel like the problem has been solved. Whereas, I feel like a TI user might be like, well, again, because TI is concerned with accuracy and truth, a TI user might be like, okay, yeah, you got them to shut up, but have you really solved the problem? Have you really actually effectively solved the problem, or are you, in a way, kind of taking a shortcut and actually maybe creating an even deeper problem that's going to kind of recoil and come back at you later on? TI users tend to look beyond just the objective, kind of temporary, in-your-face facts or logic, quote-unquote facts, or like, okay, if I do this, then this happens, therefore it works. Okay, hey, maybe it does kind of work on a certain level, but maybe there's something deeper to this. Maybe there's more to this than just what we're observing. And to me, that is a very practical way of looking at it. It's just a different focus. It's just looking at things in a broader level, in a bigger picture, beyond just the immediate observable facts. And that's not to say that TE only operates in the immediate world. TE users, for example, I believe Elon Musk to be an INTJ, and his TE, I think, combined with his introverted intuition, seemed to kind of propel him to build things for the future that will be very handy, 10, 20 years from now. Some of the stuff he's building is just incredible. And also, TE, I feel, kind of propels the user into action a lot faster than TI, because TI is so busy speculating about, is this true? Is this actually the right thing to do? The right way to go about this? Is this the most logical way? Based on their reasoning of what they believe to be true and not true. And yeah, there is that subjective element. Like, I'm not going to deny that there is some subjectivity, but more on that later. The other thing I want to actually, that's a good transition into the next myth. I think the second myth is that, TI is totally subjective, and therefore it's kind of like this totally detached logic, and it's detached from reality, and, they're just like in their head floating around thinking about who knows what. That's not, again, that's also more of a half-truth, because, again, you got to remember, TI is very concerned with accuracy. And so TI users, when they are speculating over an issue, a problem, a theory, you better damn well believe that they are going through, extreme lengths to make sure that the data that they are collecting to support their theories, ideas, what have you, is accurate, is relevant, is coming from either collected directly, or is coming from a credible source. Like, TI users are very much trying to make sure that the data that they are taking in to postulate about things, to come up with new ideas. They are very much looking at what they consider to be objective facts and reality in order to fuel some of those thoughts. I'll give you an example. I have my own kind of I have my own ideas around marriage. I'm not a big, I'm pretty much indifferent towards marriage. I'm not really, and if anything, maybe a little bit negative and skeptical about it because, based on objective facts, okay, looking at the divorce rate, okay, looking at, there's been not only looking at the divorce rate, but there's also been various studies done that prove out that the majority of people who are married don't necessarily feel like they married their soulmate, okay? So you have people getting divorced in, pretty large numbers, almost, hovering around almost 50% if it's not already 50%. And it seems to be rising. Then you have the percentage of people who stay married but aren't necessarily fulfilled or happy. So, then you look at, the way, especially for males, how they tend to kind of get, they tend to have to give up all these assets. And you just look at all this stuff. This is not subjective stuff that I use to evaluate my ideas about this. I look at all this stuff, but at the same time, using TI, I do sit back and think, okay, yeah, sure, all this is happening, but is there something deeper behind this that is like, kind of a saving grace for this? Like, I'll consider that, but, I do look at like objective reality to objective reality is very often kind of the starting point from which a TI user will then consider the bigger picture. So don't think, like, it seems like people seem to think that TI is just totally subjective, totally detached from reality. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, the subjective part comes in when we start thinking about what is true, what is false, what is accurate, like, or what is right, like, what is logically correct. That can be a little bit subjective. And more personal, but make no mistake, like they are definitely looking at more objective data to then arrive at a conclusion. And often what you'll find is even if you disagree with the TI Dom on something, typically if they really walk you through step by step why they kind of believe that, you'll probably be like, oh, I can see why you see that, or see why you believe that, even though I have a different opinion than you about this. Like, you will see that it is a very logical reasoning as to why they believe that. Now, yes, there'll be some subjectivity in that, maybe, based on their personal values and beliefs, they really think that, maybe they have a belief that maybe they have a belief that marriage isn't about being happy, right? So then they're looking at all these divorce rates and divorce stats and things like that, and they may speculate and say, hey, marriage seems pretty fucked up, but, I think it's important that we do this, and I think this is really good for the family, yada yada, so therefore, I'm going to move forward with it and find a mate, even though I know, hey, it may be rough, I still think this is an important thing to do. So that's an example of, how the logical conclusions and implications for somebody who is a TI user might be a little bit more personal in nature, but you better believe that they are looking at the real world. They're not just postulating out of thin air. Although, sure, I'm sure TI users like to do thought experiments for fun, but again, they're aware that they're just doing thought experiments for fun. They're not going to do a thought experiment and then try to shove that down somebody's throat to accept it, because they know they're just like, they're just postulating. So, yeah, that's two. So the one that says, what's the third thing I was gonna say? I think the third myth for TI is that TI users just go about learning things just to learn them, and there's no like real point to it. They just learn because they're just happy to learn. This is, again, not the full truth. It's not the full truth. It's more of a half-truth. TI users are very stimulated by learning about things, learning about systems, learning how things work. But it's not necessarily just to be doing it. Because what you have to understand is that, especially for TI DOMs like myself, what we are typically trying to do is we are kind of in our head secretly building a massive kind of architecture and structure that basically describes how the entire world, how reality itself works. And so when when we appear to be randomly studying about, how flowers have all these different ways to, make their seeds kind of spread out across, various areas to, have them grow, have their species continue, or how, bees interact with flowers to like spread their seeds and all that kind of stuff. It may appear on the surface very random, but what's actually happening again is that there is this grand design or architecture for how we feel that there is some logical system or mechanic to behind everything that describes and kind of fully shows how it works. And so when we're looking at all these different things, we are adding to this grand structure of understanding of the world that is actually all connected to each other. So when people say, "Oh, they're just learning this just to be learning it," and they have no practical use of it, we may not have a immediate use of it, directly. Like if I learn about flowers, I may not necessarily go look to plant a garden the next day. But I think the TI believes that if I can understand, everything and how everything is connected to one another, then I'm going to be able to kind of really take control of my own reality and kind of navigate the world in a way where I can start, even predicting how things will happen because I understand how it works on a fundamental level. And so when we are quote unquote randomly learning all this stuff, and look, a lot of it gets forgotten. I'm not gonna lie about that, but there is sort of a plan behind it. Again, it's more of a grand plan and kind of a long-term thing that kind of grows as you get older. But I just wanted to kind of put that in perspective. Like, they're not just totally learning things for no reason. They feel that if they learn about all these different systems, for example, if I learn something about how the biology of flowers, I might be able to use that structure of understanding into another context, with my any or whatever function I use for this. But for example, by understanding the biology and the components of a flower, I might be working on a very complex data chart for a business pitch, and I may struggle with how to represent that data. Well, since I understand how a flower works, depending on the data that I have, maybe there's like kind of maybe I'm trying to describe a complex system that has multiple components that work together as part of a larger system. Well, I could potentially represent that, in a slide as each component being like the petal of a flower. You see what I'm saying? Like, I can use and wield my understanding of that one thing in the context of another thing, because again, the TI user is going to see how all of these things are related and similar and alike and different but still connected, and so even though there may not be, whereas an INTJ might be more one-track minded and really focused on a specific thing and really hammering away at it, which has its strengths. Again, I'm not here to knock other cognitive functions or knock TE, because I feel like the more understanding I have for all of these functions, the more you realize that, you actually probably do. I mean, we all have all 8 functions. We value certain ones over the others. And if we were paid more attention and were more aware of our own psychology, I think we would notice when some of these other functions we don't like are actually working within us. But since we don't identify, our egos don't identify with those, we see them as not us. And so we suppress the kind of influence of those those functions. So that's all I got now. I just wanted to get that out. Hopefully this will provide a better understanding of TI for people who don't use or value TI at all. But yeah, any questions or comments, please leave them below, and I'm happy to jump in and answer.